Welcome to Neal on Fire, where we talk with innovators changing how we detect and fight wildfires. Today, we're exploring how climate modeling can predict wildfire risk before wildfire ignition even happens. Today, my guest is Subarna Bhattacharyya, the founder of Climformatics, a company at the forefront of predictive climate intelligence. Welcome, Subarna.
Thank you, Neil. Great to be here.
For listeners who may not know yet, what is Climformatics and what problem are you solving?
So, Climformatics is a company that builds product that can predict localized climate 2 months to a year ahead. And that means we are able to see extreme events like wildfire, like fire weathers, like heat waves, like drought conditions, like storms way ahead before it is imminent. And so that makes us time for proactive mitigation.
That's great. So, what first inspired you to start Climformatics, and maybe touch on your background in this field before you started the company?
Sure. So I was working on catastrophe risk modeling in the industry, and I learned how to model risks like severe thunderstorms and hurricanes and so on. But it always occurred to me that there is a missing piece, which is we do not know when these storms are going to come and where and what category. And so when I got a chance to work on climate modeling at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab for my postdoc, I was working in abrupt climate change scenarios for as part of IPCC Working Group 1. And there we understood a lot of this large scale, we were simulating various emission scenarios which could lead to abrupt climate change, but they were always on a very long time scale. And so I was very excited because we wanted to put together, we were wondering how we can improve the climate modeling and bring it to make it actionable such that we can understand the current climate state better and we can use that information to make it actionable, make it predictable. So connecting the dots between the catastrophe risk modeling and climate modeling showed me a path that's possible. And together with my founder, with our co-founder, Dr. Detlina Ivanova, we were both working at the lab at that time and toying with this idea that what if we could predict the drought? California gets so many droughts before it comes. Can we help the wine growers? Can we help the businesses? Can we set an alarm early enough so that they can procure their resources? And that is what started the company. And at some point, we decided to leave the lab and take this idea forward. We rolled up our sleeves and started coding.
So, the impact of drought on vineyards is really kind of the call to action that got you starting the company.
Yes, because we had friends in the wine industry who were asking us questions on El Ninos, on droughts, on heat waves, not getting enough water, not able to grow good quality wine grapes. And that got us thinking that is no one working on this? Can we not help them in any way? And that's what started our initial spark. And we thought there is a possibility we can make a change.
That's great. So, in simple terms, how does Climformatics forecasting differ from traditional climate or weather models?
Sure. So for that, we first need to understand that weather models are something that can predict how our weather is going to be from a few hours to maybe a few days ahead. Typically 5 days time frame, and nowadays it is extended to a week to 10 days. But beyond that, the weather models lose their skills. And that's because when you go further away in time, the weather phenomena is affected by many other phenomena in the atmosphere, in the ocean, that gradually takes it over to the climate domain. So what what we try to understand in our work is how we can fill this gap between weather and climate. So climate is something much more longer term, and that happens slowly compared to the weather, which changes very rapidly within a short time. So what our modeling does is we try to fill this gap between the weather and climate. And so that's why our models are different from traditional weather models. Weather models lose skills after 5 days, 10 days. Further away you go, you will have lesser and lesser skills. But our models don't because we work with climate. And so our skills for day one versus a year ahead is more or less the same. And we are working with the climate models, but using the output at the weather scale. So that makes us look similar to weather, but really we are doing climate forecast.
So, where is the line of demarcation in terms of the number of days or months, whatever period of time
More
you
than a
would
month.
look to weather for versus climate?
So you look to weather for 1 to 2 weeks. Anything beyond that is climate. So we usually can forecast 1 month ahead to a few months ahead to 1 year ahead and beyond. One thing I wanted to also add is that weather is more or less an immediate surface kind of phenomenon. Like you're talking about winds, temperature, rain, pressure, how much sun you would get, how much solar, things like that. But when you go to climate, it is actually a lot more than that. You have the ocean interacting with the atmosphere, ocean interacting with largely, with the vegetation, with the ecosystem, and you have different parts of atmosphere reacting with each other, different parts of the biosphere speaking to each other at different time scales. And that's why you have climate on a much longer time scales because they interact at much larger time scales. And so you have impacts of glaciers, of ocean sediments, of the atmospheric chemistry, of the ocean biochemistry, of the land and its chemistries. So there are various different parts of the biosphere that talk to each other. And that's what is captured by the climate dynamics, by the climate models. And so that gives us much richer set of information to work with, a much more complete set. And that's why we prefer using that. And the gap is what we try to fill with our proprietary machine learning and algorithms that makes our forecast more realistic, more accurate, that you can rely on.
Let's talk about that secret sauce for a moment. So, what kind of data sources do you rely on? And you mentioned machine learning. How does that connect in with those forecasts to make them more accurate or useful?
Yeah, so we we use both climate model data that is available and climate models themselves as well as weather observation data and historical data, all of them. We try to learn from history. Try to learn from the climate models. We try to learn from the weather. And all of this is what we package into our algorithms.
Got it.
And what that helps us do is actually address some of the missing subgrid processes that a certain resolution of climate models may not have. And one of the important things to remember here is working with climate models is extremely computational intensive. Depending on how much computation and how much time you have, you basically decide or optimize as to what the resolution you will be computing in. So higher the resolution we can go, more sophisticated results you get. But there's always a trade-off between, what we can do and what is good to do.
So we live in a graphical world. What you've talked about so far is very data intensive, but for users of your system, they're going to be looking at the Climb Prepare dashboard, which we're going to show on the screen here. So can you take us through kind of what we're looking at here and what the user experience might be and what kind of data they might be able to pull out from the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have all of these dashboards as something you can look at from our website. And particularly, if you go to our website and click demo on the top buttons, you can get the entire suite of dashboards we have. And the Climb Prepare is currently listed there as a fire weather dashboard. So what it does is it opens up an interactive session where you can select the time frame, like where what time ahead you're looking a forecast from. And with the time slider, you can select a location from the map, as well as you can select the various variables. And as you select the various variables, you have the options of selecting between temperature maximum, temperature minimum, humidity, relative humidity, maximum, minimum wind speed, and then all the fire weather metrics like fire weather index, heat stress index, the severe fire danger index, burning index, energy release component at each and every of the location. And not only that, it has the map itself has a gradient and contoured depiction of each of these variables that you select. And then as you select the location, you have the option of opening up the further visualizations of the time series of any of the variables. So for example, if you want to see what is the fire weather index going to be at a particular location and you click that particular index, it will open up a visualization of the time series for the entire time scale that you have asked for. Excuse me. But other than that, you can also overlay the transmission lines on top of these contours so that you can see which transmission lines would be most vulnerable in the event of a fire or where the high fire risks are in terms of fire weather index or severe fire danger index. How close are they to which transmission lines so that you can identify the vulnerability from there? And you can do this at least 3 months ahead. And so that gives a lead time to prepare proactively for the fire risk.
So you've said that Climformatics can predict wildfire risk zones with remarkable accuracy. How early can you see those indicators for wildfires?
Well, we have in at least this year fire season, we have forecasted all our fire weather forecasts on May 1st, and the fire started happening. I mean, we forecasted that in 3 months, in August, at the end of August, at the end of July, and into September's that there will be fires in certain locations. And that actually ended up happening, many of them. And so definitely we can predict 3 months ahead, which is what we have done this fire season. But we can also see them at least a few seasons, so maybe 2 seasons a year ahead with reasonable accuracy.
Wow, that's great. So, how does your system accommodate things like terrain, vegetation, microclimates, all these different variables that impact not just weather, but also climate?
Yes, because we can go very high resolution, so we are not, in that sense, we are not limited by the resolution as such. We have two kinds of products that we are building. One is you provide us any location, like latitude, longitude, and we can tell you the exact location, the prediction of all the indices at that particular location. The
So,
other product,
anywhere in the world, you can do that.
anywhere in the world, yes.
Wow, it's impressive.
Thank you. But the other thing that we are thinking, I mean, not thinking, we are already building it, is a 4x4, 4 kilometer by 4 kilometer grid for all of California, all of US, and 5 by 25 kilometer grid for all the world, where any location you have will be having a forecast, a preliminary forecast at that resolution. And so that product would be easily downloadable, interactable, and that does not have any limitations. It could be anywhere in the world, and you would have a prediction to start working with. But the localized ones where we are producing, you give us a location and we give you the forecast for that, that is even more accurate than the gridded products because of the nature of information. So, yeah, so we're excited about scaling up.
That's great. So, how do you identify the preconditions that lead to wildfire ignition or potentially rapid spread of a wildfire?
Yeah, so because we are able to see the high fire risk areas and the condition, and the way we are able to see is we are able to see that you're going to have a heat wave and then you're going to have increase in the winds. If the winds pick up, very easily a fire weather season a fire weather condition a heat wave condition can give rise to a fire weather condition. And if the relative humidity indicators are low, then that becomes a very high risk area. And all the more so if you have a considerable amount of fuel out there to burn. And so we are able to forecast each and everything that contributes to the wildfire condition, to the fire weather condition. We cannot forecast the ignition because ignitions can happen due to many different kinds of accidents. It can happen from lightnings. It can happen from failures of utility equipment. It can happen from a camping fire accident. So we are not able to predict how the ignition is going to happen. But that the condition, the fire weather condition, the SFDI, the severe fire danger index conditions, that those are conducive for a small fire to become a large fire is what we can forecast.
So I understand that you have several pilots underway. There's been a great deal of interest in this, which now that you're telling me all about it, I can completely understand. It seems like a great application. So we're going to look at a couple here, starting with what you did for the Grid Edge Expo this year, earlier in San Diego. Walk us through that and what were you able to share about your application there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had quite a few pilots, mainly with Cal Fire, with um, a computer community choice aggregator here in Northern California, and then with a Central Valley tech company. So, three different sectors of pilots we did as part of our CalSeed prototype award. So, for the Cal Fire, we actually reached out to Cal Fire and they provided us a challenge for about 6 locations in California. And these locations are based all over California across their most fire division areas, 6 different zones. And we actually worked with them to provide very detailed fire risk analysis for previous fires that has happened through last few years
Huh.
and also a forecast ahead for this year for all those locations. And that pretty much covers all the different fire zones of California. So, with that, we are very excited because we are able to get detailed analytics, error metrics as to, what actually happened, what we said, how much we are off by, and could this be used for, um, how CAL FIRE could have changed their or improved their mitigation strategies or better budgeted their procurement needs. So those are evaluations we are currently doing. But yeah, we have done those and they came out to be remarkably accurate.
Wow. Well, certainly Cal Fire would be a great customer for you. So I hope your pilot goes well.
Thank you.
So we've talked about utilities during when you were talking about the application, you talked specifically about power lines. So clearly utilities are a great application for Climformatics. So what other types of industries or customers are you targeting?
Yeah. So definitely utilities is something that we are very interested and we are currently pursuing that sector. For utilities, it is actually a slightly different kind of a challenge than Cal Fire is what we understood. And the difference is that utilities have to provide power to their customers, whether it's a heat wave condition or whether it's a fire weather condition. And we actually built a product that is called the Early Alert Warning System. And what that does is it allows utilities to basically, let's say, balance between the compound climate events that can occur. So for example, you're having an ongoing heat wave and you need to give more power for maybe running extra cooling and extra air conditioning to your customers and, you know, businesses, hospitals, offices, etc. But then the wind picks up, and now from a heat wave condition, we are having a fire weather condition where you're thinking as a utility, if the risk is high, maybe I have to shut off power. But those decisions are also having consequences because, you might be needing to provide power to vulnerable communities, healthcare institutions where you cannot take off power because people are on life support. So there are those kind of considerations that how do you balance that? Now imagine if you have this early alert warning system which tells you 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead, even earlier, that these are the times when you're going to get these kind of compound events, then you may be able to drive better power purchasing agreements so that even if you take off power from a particular transmission lines which is more vulnerable to this risk, you might be able to get power elsewhere at a cheaper rate and maybe even a greener power at a cheaper rate if you know this well in advance. And so then necessarily your customers may not have to go through a lot of suffering because of those conditions because you have acted early enough. So
Wow.
that's the thing that we are building for the utility and in general energy sector. The third thing is actually we are able to do with our forecasting, capacity forecasting for solar, for hydro. Solar, we have already developed. Hydro, we are currently in the, developing and testing phase. So that would tell you how much behind the meter solar you can get, how much power you need and how, what is the deficit, how much you need to get from elsewhere. And if all of this information you have well ahead of time, then you can plan better, buy power for your deficit at a much reasonable rate rather than the spot market pricing. So that's the thing. And the other thing interesting alongside this is solar is not just solar. Solar also includes cloud, how much of the cloud would be there, how much of other temperature driven events are going to affect your production. So it's not just that we're predicting one variable and in a piecemeal manner. It is like the whole integrated things that will be affecting your generation from the climate side of things is what we are targeting. Industries are also looking promising and we are connecting with some of them. The other sector is actually, we are recently connecting with the, wildfire mitigation industry itself. Like you have people building sensors, which are in the, in the vegetation areas, and they can detect any spark of smoke or, gas in some capacity that comes out during the starting of a fire. It can provide an early detection. So those companies would be benefiting from our forecast because we can tell them which are the higher risk areas, compare higher fire risk areas or higher SFDI areas where they should have the sensors and when.
Huh.
Those two factors can drive them, people with drones, people with sensors, cameras, and we are starting to talk with some of them. So that's another sector that is looking promising. And of course, you have insurance sector. We are trying to talk to them, but the problem with the insurance sector is that they have legacy risk models, which are based on, claims data, vulnerability data, and a lot of data, but not much of climate in there.
Mm.
And so, the usual storms or events with a return period of 1,000 years, 100 years, 500 years are now becoming 5 years, 10 years, 3 years, and so on. And so in this changing scenario, the legacy risk models are not able to cope up with the risk that is imminent. And so we are trying to tell them that this is how it needs to change. You have to change to emerging risk models. But the adoption I so far have received is not very great.
So, as we've been sitting here talking, I've been thinking about maybe even some other potential uses. Like if you can predict heat, then you could work with healthcare providers, hospitals to say there's a heat wave coming potentially, and you need to adapt accordingly, maybe within a city where they might need to provide cooling facilities. And then also for floods, if those events are coming. So I think even beyond much of what we talked about has been around energy and wildfires, but it seems like given what's going on with the climate, there are several other use cases
Yes.
that expand it even further.
Thank you for asking that question. We actually are working already on that line, on those line of thoughts. We are very fortunate. We partner with UC Berkeley's internship program, and they often facilitate sending their students to work with us as interns, and in return, they get college credits. So, one such effort that we did with those interns is actually building a healthcare kind related product where we can predict the based on the heat wave how many number of patients are you likely to see in your hospitals in a week ahead of time. So, yes, with the heat wave going on and in the location of the hospitals, just like we are able to predict the heat wave across anywhere in California, we use that information to go in to see how much it affects the healthcare in those areas so that the people who are vulnerable to it would be needing those healthcare facilities. And therefore, can we help with preparing the hospitals and those caregivers for a surge in the number of patients? Would they have enough beds? Would they have enough instruments? Would they have enough people to take care? So yes, we are able to do that. That we haven't yet. That particular product is not on our demo site yet, but will be soon.
Great. So, with all these great use cases that we've been talking about, what are the biggest barriers keeping predictive climate models like yours from being widely adopted?
So there are several. I think one of the first thing that we are facing is that we are getting bucketed very easily with the weather companies. And a lot of people we talk to think the weather companies are our competitors, but they're not actually, because we are not predicting weather. And so we are predicting climate, and the education that is needed to understand that the weather and climate are different things and that we are not claiming to predict weather 1 year in advance is still something we are having difficulty messaging as we speak. That's our for one big barrier. So companies are still learning about these differences. And so we are not yet getting kind of acceptance that we should, because we are coming from a climate science perspective
I
and
understand.
we're not fitting with weather.
So,
That's what, yeah, definitely.
looking forward in 5 years, we've talked about the challenges with people looking at the model and trying to draw a distinction between it and weather. In 5 years, what is your hope for where you will be as a company?
We hope that we will be able to change people's minds and therefore their lives, because we will stop getting surprised by all these big climate events. We will remove the word unforeseen from our climate catastrophic events. And to be able to do that, we need large scale adoption with companies who can make the adoption possible. So for example, if we work with companies who does all this kind of, let's say business analytics, automation, planning softwares and integration of them into large enterprise companies, if we work with them and they provide our intelligence as part of their offering, then it becomes much more acceptable when you're working with companies. Like if I'm an enterprise company and I give the responsibility of building my business automation, intelligence, system upgrades to another system integrator kind of a company. And because of their reputation and their already, presence in the market, it is much more going to be accepted rather than me trying to knock their doors and saying that, okay, here is this great product, please install that. So we are trying to find those avenues, and that can make a big difference where this solution can be adopted and used in all kinds of business analytics, whether it is enterprise level, different industry sectors, government sectors. And if that can be, then we can have a much stronger handle on large scale climate driven disasters. We can prevent them. We may not be able to prevent the disasters in itself, but we can definitely improve lives of people, community, businesses, reduce losses, and learn to adopt and, find our way around that.
I have learned so much about predicting the climate today. This has been a powerful conversation about how your company turns climate data into real prevention and resilience tools. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast today, Subarna. It's been great having you here.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Neal.
So, to learn more about Climformatics, visit Climformatics or follow them on LinkedIn for updates and case studies. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow Neal on Fire and share it with someone passionate about wildfire innovation.
Thank you.